Audio Dragon. We have some hella interesting news, maps, and discoveries about Australia still to this day. Blows my mind as a country and as people as well. So let's just get straight into this one. This is going to be a good episode. All right, so first up we have a map, and this one is actually very fascinating. I didn't actually know this in all the facts I've ever heard about Australia. I think you guys have the potentially biggest postcode in the world. If anyone wants to maybe elaborate on that, or if they've heard something like that, I would love to hear. But if we take a look at the biggest postcode or zip code in Australia, if you didn't already guess, this is 0872 or 0872. And it says that this is unlike most Aussie postcodes. Actually, let me put it in this view so you can see this a little up close. It spans 3 states and territories. It makes up 15% of the whole country by area. It has 89 separate delivery locations, but only about 14,000 people in this whole area. That's kind of insane. Because as you can see, this is huge. Wonder how they schedule the postal vans as the roads aren't too flash out there. So that's what I'm thinking. It's a humongous area, right? If people aren't comprehending how big this is, I mean, Australia is huge, and this is literally like a fraction of it. And it's one zip code. So that already blows my mind. Then you throw in the fact that it's not like we're down near Sydney or Melbourne or something, right? This is in like essentially the middle of nowhere. There is, towns here and there, or maybe you could argue small cities if you want to stretch it to that. Like when we think of like Alice Springs, yeah, honestly, that's the only place that comes to mind. Yeah, this is the middle of nowhere. There's not much going on here. So if the size wasn't crazy enough, you only have 14,000 people across this massive area. In other words, it is empty as hell out there. With that being said, the roads, yeah, they're not going to have like amazing, perfect quality, beautiful looking roads, because why would they? There's barely anyone out there. There's barely any traffic. Everything about this is kind of crazy, right? It's bigger than the states of Victoria and New South Wales combined. For reference, if you wanted to know how big this is, it's almost twice the size of the U.S. state of Texas. And if it were a country, it would rank 25th in size. Slightly smaller than South Africa, slightly larger than Colombia. Does Canada or Russia perhaps have a larger postcode? The USA doesn't. The largest zip code in the U.S. is in the state of Alaska, of course, which is a massive state, at a tiny 55,000 square kilometers compared to 1.16 million square kilometers of this mentioned 0872. Anyway, I just think this is fascinating. You get a look at the map here, and it's very bizarre, right? When you see these really for anywhere, but of course when you see it for Australia, of course you see all what looks like millions of very small, oddly shaped postcodes everywhere along where the population centers are, right? Especially around the coast, and then of course the west coast down by Perth, even Tasmania. And then, of course, you expect them to get bigger as you go into the kind of rural, less populated areas. But, dude, this is kind of fascinating seeing this laid out. I mean, we have some really weird shapes out there. And this is one of those things that as like a regular, person that doesn't do anything with official stuff, right? I'm just a civilian, man, just a random dude in the U.S., Obviously, I've never done urban planning. I'm not a politician. I don't work for the government. When I see all this stuff, it kind of makes my head spin. Like, how do they even come up with all these shapes and keep track of it? It's kind of wild. And when you see it on a map of a country that big, like Australia, and you see all this, it's just like, whoa. I find it very fascinating, but I also find it like overwhelming. Like, oh my God, this is so much going on. And how the hell is this one so big? Of course, if we go to the comments, only one postman for the entire area. That would be a lot of work, I feel like. This adds context for being Australia is really effing huge. Great question. Supposedly, though, someone did come up with the largest one, and supposedly it is in Russia. Russia has the Sakha Republic 677 or 678 postal code encompassing 3 million kilometers squared. That's actually insane. Let's see if this works. Yeah, you can see it right here. Whoa. Whoa. That's actually crazy. So, I mean, kind of not a huge surprise if you think of how absolutely massive Russia is. This is just crazy, right? The fact that that's all like one zip code, and it's like hours and hours and hours and hours of travel by any form of travel to get across this is kind of funny. Where in Australia is the most Australian? I thought this one was actually kind of funny. Let's take a look at what they said. Queenslander here, potentially going to get a lot of flack for this one. A lot of the suburbs around here are intensely metropolitan. It can sometimes not really seem like you're in Australia at all. For example, the sun is just as intense anywhere else, but you can't wear a proper Aussie hat without looking like a dork. So you wear a baseball cap and get melanoma. Oh, jeez. Cultural events can be dead AF depending on the area. A full-scale Australia Day is kind of rare, and let's be real, that was only getting drunk around a barbecue to begin with. If you ever been taking a real cultural festival tied to an immigrant community, for example, Vietnamese Lunar Festival, you'll know what I mean. That's Aussie cities. If I travel inland to the towns, get more and more just a pub. No offense, Warwick, but if your own residents think it's enough of a shite hole to move to Logan, you're effed, mate. Further inland, and some dudes going Call of Duty on herds of feral camels. My goodness, what the hell am I reading? In conclusion, are there any pockets of non-metropolitan Australian culture anywhere? So, of course, I can't really weigh in on this, but I thought it was kind of an interesting question, though, maybe even not presented exactly like this original poster did. But, turning it to you, where in Australia is the most Australian? That's, I feel like, a very subjective question. Could be answered a lot of different ways, and of course would be different answers based on basically everyone who answers that. So it's not really, a serious question, but I thought would be kind of interesting, because if I think about it from my perspective, this would be almost impossible to answer for the United States, right? Like, where in the U.S. is the most American? Well, that kind of depends on who you ask, right? I tend to say in my videos before, I can tell you that, California, basically anywhere, the big cities there, and like the Northeast, like Boston or New York, are like, more specifically maybe New York City, are not what I think of as America. They're what I think of as like media America, like what you see in movies and stuff. Every other movie's in New York City or Los Angeles, right? But that's not really America, because if you go travel through a lot of the interior states, that's more America to me. But that's just my perspective. The way the fashion is, the way the lifestyle is, the people, the hardworking people, the friendliness, all that stuff is going to be a lot more present in a lot of the country, whereas you're not going to find that in Los Angeles or New York City. It's going to be a totally different vibe. And I think this probably applies to Australia as well. You guys have millions of people that live in these humongous Sydney metropolitan areas, Melbourne as well. Maybe you can even throw in like Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth. And outside of that, I mean, there's not a lot left. But the people that are living way far away from any of those places, I feel like would have a different lifestyle and perhaps, different people than someone living downtown Sydney. This one I threw in there. What country would you say has the most diversity in terms of climate? I thought Australia might be in the top 10 here. I was surprised to see that it wasn't. If I go here, someone actually did the data. The USA was first. I thought the USA would be on here because we do have everything. Everyone on the internet anymore is always negativity about the USA, but I tell you what, the US does have an amazing climate variation. That's why a lot of people don't ever leave here, because there's just so much to do. There's so much to see. USA kicks ass at geography and climates. We have everything. I was surprised to see like India, Pakistan, Argentina, China, Chile, Spain, Ecuador, Mexico, and Russia as finishing out the top 10 according to the Koppen-Geiger classification. So yeah, I guess the consensus, Australia didn't make the top 10, so it's not super climate variated. I guess I said that wrong. Basically, come on, we all know Australia's just hot. Here is something that's actually crazy just about wildlife in general. And of course, a lot of things have been populated, and kind of just a lot of things that have came into Australia and kind of ran crazy. We're talking about rabbits here, okay? In 1859, 24 rabbits were released into the wild in Australia. Within 6 years only, the number had grown to 6 million individuals. 24 to 6 million. I'm sorry. That is actually insane. Those 24 rabbits showed up in Australia and they just, boy, they just got to work. Also, I don't know whose idea this was, but boy, I hope they planned for this because if they didn't, someone effed up. All right, now this next bit is actually hilarious. Over here in the U.S., if someone has really like bright and vibrant red hair, you would just call them a redhead, right? I think that's very universal. Typically, it would be redhead. Maybe you hear the term ginger as well. That's all I've ever heard. Apparently, redheads in Australia are nicknamed blueies. Is this true? But it goes even further than this. I thought this is actually pretty funny. If you're like 65 years old, maybe, everyone in the last 3 generations is calling them rangas. I've never heard these terms, right? Never heard a redhead called a bluey. Never heard a redhead called a ranga. Everyone seems to agree that rangas is the in term. But then you got to love this one right here. Get a look at this. Gingeradoos. If that isn't the most Australian thing I've heard in a while, that takes the cake right there. Aussie slang will never fail to just make me bust out laughing. It is freaking fascinating. And finally, if you're into the Olympics, I have a lot of catching up to do. I won't get to watch like a lot of them, but I have some that I've like sort of DVR'd, like taped or whatever. Some events that I would like to see that I have to catch up on, but I did hear all over the news the last couple days that I think it's Arisa True becomes the youngest medalist in Australian history and one of the youngest medalists ever, I would imagine. She won a freaking gold medal at 14 years old in skateboarding. I think that's absolutely insane. If I can pull up my view here. Yeah, becomes our youngest medalist at 14 years and 84 days old. I imagine that's got to be one of the youngest of all time, right? I mean, geez. I was not winning medals or anywhere near the Olympics at 14. That's absolutely thrilling. I can't imagine what that must feel like for her. So I think that's really cool. And shout out to her. And of course, shout out to Australia. I feel like you guys always bring it when it comes to sports. And from what I hear, you guys have been doing very well. So that's awesome. I mean, the comments sum it up. Absolutely insane. I mean, what else is there to say? Imagine going back to school as an Olympic gold medalist. What a legend. Yeah. It would be wild to be her at school. I mean, no one else or at school, no one else is walking around there, has a gold medal. No one else has lived that life at all. I mean, that's a very unique opportunity and result as well. So, yeah, bravo for that. But hey, I'm going to cut it there. This was another fun dive into the internet and Australia, specifically some really interesting maps and kind of factoids on this one. But hey, I appreciate you guys watching, and hopefully I will see you in the next one. My name is Ian. You're watching IWrocker. Until next time, y'all. I'll catch you later.